Hello, this is Faith at Faith and Books. I am so sorry about the light up there. I hope you can stand to look at it, but it's at night. I just put the chicken in the oven, and I just came up here because I have a couple of minutes, and I'm still chugging along in the Earth User's Guide to Permaculture. I know it's no longer November, but I'm just going to keep going until I'm done. I just have super slow lately, and my glasses broke yesterday, so I have to keep. They're like the pin fell out. I got to go get them fixed. But every time I adjust them, I smudge them, and then I go to clean them, and the lens falls out again. So it's a terrible catch-22. So I can barely see. But anyway, so I'm gonna start. I forget actually where I left off the last. I'm too lazy to go back and look. So, but I'm going to go with chapter 11, How and Where We Live, Zone 0. So the way permaculture does it is it makes land in these concentric circles. Zone 0 is where you actually live. Then zone 1 is your garden, your land around you. And then zone 2 is your food forest. And then she goes into more detail about the food forest. And then there's an orchard. That's zone 3. And then I haven't gotten to the other one, zone 4 and stuff. I've only gone through zone 3. Anyway, zone 0 is interesting because it incorporates your house into your whole permaculture lifestyle, where you always think about the consequences of your actions on the earth. So, so let's see, she says, live differently, live well. Let's see, she says, our ethical task is to build new homes and retrofit old ones using renewable materials, low energy, and minimum pollution. Live in our homes with simplicity. So, and then she's under live differently, live well. For thousands of years, there have been cultures that have enjoyed a high quality of life without compromising the needs of present and future generations by destroying or polluting life processes. Okay, and then compare this with modern Western lifestyles, which are characterized by excessive consumerism, alienation from nature, overprocessing of materials, overconsumption and dissatisfaction, embarrassing levels of waste of all resources, overly busy and complicated lives. So, you want to, now I already live in a house, so she sort of talked about retrofitting. And I would like to go more into that. And in fact, this chapter kind of inspired me to start thinking about New Year's resolutions. And one thing I want to do is really go through and do an audit of the house, how much energy we use, where we can simplify, all that kind of stuff. But she goes into siting a new house, and the whole thing is about, what kind of land you live on, what home would best suit you, how can you design things so that you'll use energy more efficiently and therefore less energy. Can you use solar? Can you use wind? Can you use geothermal? That kind of thing. What's the surrounding land use? And she just goes, it's real simple, just very overall, because, she's really coming from Australia, but she's trying to be global in her general ideas that she's presenting. And I like this audit thing. It looks really hard, but I would like to do that in 2021 to my own house and see just exactly where we use up the most energy and how we can change that. Let's see. Yeah, this was weird because I'm not a great cook, and we do takeaway or takeout at least 3 times a week because I'm just so bad. And I try to get food out with the least amount of trash. Like a lot of stuff's packaged in plastic. I try to remember the restaurants that don't. They use paper and cardboard, but it's still bad. But she says, remember that takeaway food outlets contribute substantially to air pollution compared with home cooking. So I guess, does she mean driving there and picking it up or waiting at the drive-through? That makes sense, I guess. But I never thought about that. I mostly thought about just how they tend to use the cheaper meat that isn't like locally grown. It's not grass-fed. It's not as healthy for you, of course. And the packaging. I never really thought about the air pollution side of that. So I feel very guilty because I'm such a lazy cook, and we have really picky appetites, and we have really strange diets. Like my daughter is on this really restrictive diet. I'm gluten free. And then we have picky eaters that will only eat like certain really junky foods, and I'm trying to be low sugar. And it's really hard to cook for this family. It's really hard. Anyway, so that's what this chapter was about planning your house and how you're going to design it and how you're going to make it simpler and how you're going to make it work for you more efficiently. And so it was a good chapter, and it's inspired me. The next one is your garden, zone 1. Let's see. Our ethical task is to grow as much food as we can at home and ensure that home gardens carry out several vital ecological functions. So, anyway, so she goes into that. Let's see. Trying to remember what I pulled out of this. I mean, the thing is, this was too general for me because I already have very specific issues and very specific questions. It's the light. The camera looks like it's going in and out. I'm sorry if the light's shifting. But anyway, this was all about planning your garden and how do you plan your garden so that the plants will help each other grow. Like one plant might, and you've heard of it probably, companion planting, where certain things like to grow together, or certain things will repel pests of other things, or certain plants will attract pollinators that will benefit another plant, that sort of thing. So, but this made me want to get a citrus tree and try to grow one indoors. She talked about that, about planting a citrus tree at your kitchen door and then bringing it in the winter. That would be pretty cool to have a citrus tree. And then I went through and I was making like notes about my own garden. But this one's like, she gives general ideas about it, but it's really very particular to your setup. So it's good to get the ideas. She talks about using gray water, which I don't think I can do in my county anyway, but we do have rainwater barrels. Weed management, that's the thing that I really, really need to work on. Companion planting, she talks about that, about native, we call it native species, but she calls it indigenous plants, trying to plant more native species in the back of my fence. Part of my yard is fenced in. Then there's a hill that goes down to a pond or a stream. Then there's a pond beyond that. And it is taken over by honeysuckle, Japanese honeysuckle, and other plants that are oriental, what is it called? Oriental something. It's just taken over by not native species. I would love to work on that area. I mean, it's way down the line because what I first want to do is grow food for my family, but I'm just starting to do that barely. And I want to establish these fruit trees and nut trees and stuff. But then I would like to eventually get to that area and get it planted, start introducing native plants to it. Anyway, so that was zone 1. And then chapter 13, sorry, the food forest, zone 2. I found this really interesting because we have peach trees, fig tree, chestnut trees, almond trees, apple trees. What else did I say? We have a bunch of trees. And I love the idea of a food forest. I really love this idea that you have like different levels, like you have herbs growing at the bottom, and then you have the bushes, and then you have the trees, and then you can even have the taller trees providing all lots and lots of your food. So she goes into that. Let's see, characteristics of a food forest. Well, first of all, the ethical task is plant productive, high-yielding fruit trees for our own use and for the future to return what we have used, to reduce food miles and unfair trade. Our design aims are grow a diverse range of food trees, create environmental stability, greatly reducing the incidence of pests and the need for artificial chemicals, plant living ground cover mulches to increase the fertility of the soil. Now, we just use mulch, like just wood mulch. We haven't gotten to the point where we're actually planting ground covers. Observe and analyze local conditions and microclimates to assist in selecting and placing appropriate species to reduce crop losses and tree failure. It's, that's what I found, that gardening is just experimenting. Every year you have a new experiment and you put things out and you learn more, and then the next year you do it again. It's just constant. It's a constant learning process. Anyway, so she talks about characteristics. Let's see, many species and cultivars of food and non-food plants. And the results of that are you provide food, fruit, animal fodder, mulch, wind protection, and habitats for beneficial predators. Small animals, including bees and free-ranging poultry. I wish I could let my chickens free range. I let them out into a little pen area. In fact, I have to go down and put them in. They put themselves in, actually. I just go and lock up and put the water back into their coop. But I wish I could let them wander around, but I'm not going to be able to do that until the spring, I think, and the leaves come in, because then nobody can see my backyard. But right now all the leaves have fallen, and they really could notice I have chickens. So that makes me a little nervous, and I'm afraid they'll get bold and fly into somebody else's yard. And I also have always wanted to keep bees. I really want to keep bees, and I have an area where I think it might work. But everyone else thinks I'm crazy because I want to keep bees, except my middle son's kind of into it. Let's see. Well, I won't go into all this because it's already 11 minutes. Anyway, it's really interesting about the food forest. I really love that concept of the food forest and learning about it. Let's see. Oops. Oh no, I dropped my pen. Okay. Feeding the orchard, pollination, pest management, plan seasonal activities 1 year in advance, retrofitting old orchards. Anyway, the next zone, then she goes into, was interesting too, the birds and the bees in the food forest. And she talks about just how beneficial a well-run organic food forest is for the life around us. The insects and the birds and small animals can really thrive in this. And so you really are, in your own little patch of the world, you really are healing the earth with it. And so it's quite a lovely idea to spend your time healing the earth that way in your own little patch of it. So I found that chapter very interesting. And then she goes into zone 3, which is if you are farming. And I did read this chapter, but this was neat too. This was actually really neat too. I mean, I'm never going to be a farmer, right? I'm never going to have anything bigger than the property I have now, which is just slightly less than 2/3 of an acre, I think, is what I've got. I always have to ask my husband exactly, but I think it's slightly under 2/3. It's an awkward amount. I can't just say, oh, we have 1 acre or 2/3 of an acre. But the farming is, they have these really interesting ways to farm using like hedgerows or like rows of trees. So what they do is they do these rows of trees that are a windbreak, and they bring the sun in, and then you have animals that are stirring up the ground and adding manure and that sort of thing. And then you have the crops. So here she's saying if you were growing sunflowers for sunflower oil or sunflower seeds. So that was really interesting to me, how they work that out. And she talks about the pros and cons of that kind of farming. So you have, you get less yield because you're spending, property, the amount of land you have, you're dedicating some of it to trees and other things. But on the other hand, it's got a lot of benefits too. She went through, it's like cheaper in the long run because you don't have to spend money so much on fertilizers and chemicals and that sort of thing. You get more for the smaller amount that you plant. And then she talked about another method, which is Fukuoka's method of natural farming, which this Japanese scientist came up with. And that was really interesting too. And he wasn't even part of the whole permaculture movement, but he sort of came up with a lot of the same ideas as these people who were sort of inventing it in Australia. So that was kind of neat. And so she gives the example of growing rice and how he has it so that you're actually growing things all year round with his. And then she talks about if you want to grow nuts, how you do that, how you treat animals in Zone 3 when you've got a farm. And that's it. Let's see, what's the very last thing that I underline? This is about parasite control. To break I've heard of this. This is rotational grazing. If you've ever heard of Joel Salatin, this is what he does. To break the cycle of eating and excretion of worms and eggs, animal cropping areas need to be rested. So we wouldn't say cropping, we'd say grazing. This is known as rotational grazing. These are different times for different parasites. There are different times for different parasites, and often quite good control can be obtained by moving the animal or the pen around the property, thus saving the need for chemical drenches. And I've even heard of farmers timing the birth of like their new calves and stuff so that they won't get parasites. Like if they're born earlier in the year, they're less likely to have get certain parasites if they're born later. So they do things like that. Anyway, so that's it. It's 16 minutes already. So that was my permaculture so far. I'm still going to work through it. I got harvest forests, which I'm never going to own a forest, natural conservation forest. But all this is still interesting because it just fits into the whole worldview. And then there's other cultures and places. That will be really interesting. Permaculture at the office, shop, and factory. That's going to be interesting. Adding resilience to design. Designing for disasters. What else? Managing pest, IPM. Integrated pest management. That's what it stands for. Living with wildlife. Weeds. I got to read that one. Ooh. Guardian of the soils. I just don't want, they just take over though, that's the problem. Aquaculture, the water permaculture. I have a friend who actually has big tanks set up in her basement and she grows lettuce and stuff like that, and spinach and in her basement. I don't think that's quite what they mean. They're talking about outside. But I always thought it would be neat to have a pond and raise fish to eat. I think that would be cool. Social permaculture, money matters, permaculture, wealth, and livelihood. I can't wait to read that. I think that will be really, really interesting. A sense of place. Anyway, I'm looking forward to reading it. I'm going to keep plugging away. I know that it was a nonfiction November thing, and I didn't finish it, but I don't care. I really want to learn it. I don't even care if anybody watches these videos. I'm just putting them out there to keep my mind focused on working my way through this book. So, anyway, if you've hung on this long, God bless you, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.